Morning. My name is Tim Axtine, and I represent Marcus and Markieff. The assault certainly happened on January 24th, 2015. There's no debate about that. No debate that Erica had a nose broken at some point during this assault. This held down on the ground. We know that because there are two people who will come and explain to you exactly what happened. Julius Kane, Mr. Fisher referred to, another man named Christopher Melendez. But they'll tell you this. Julius will say that he had known Eric Hood several years before this incident took place. And Julius grew up with Marcus and Markieff Morris. We'll spend some time with Mr. Hood when the Morrises were going to college at the University of Kansas. And Julius was living there. Mr. Hood came out to visit them. That during their time together, Julius and Mr. Hood would play Madden football, and they play for $100 a game. Usually the games would go back and forth, and it would even up. But the last time they played, Julius beat him, and he beat him 3 times in a row. And after the third game, Julius asked for Mr. Hood to pay him his money. Mr. Hood demurred, and Julius had nothing to worry about, and then he left. And Julius never saw him again. So uncounted, he didn't see him. He didn't see him until several years later, January 24th, 2015, where by some degree of coincidence, Julius, along with Marcus, Markieff Morris, Christopher Melendez, and a 5th individual, were at this game at the Arch Community Center. This is an overhead Google image of what that facility looks like. And I think it's important that I brought it out now, so you as jurors can get a sense of where the witnesses are saying various events occurred in a way that I'm going to describe to you in a second. Is simply, for the state's witnesses, entirely inconsistent and incompatible with the truth. What Mr. Kane will tell you is this, that he waited outside the gym doors, in this area, sort of marked outside door, that at some point, maybe 10 minutes or so after the final ended that night, Hood came out, that the two of them began to exchange words, and that Mr. Melendez, seeing that his friend Julius was apparently about to get into some kind of physical altercation, ran over, and as Mr. Fisher described, hit Mr. Hood in the back of the head. And Mr. Hood ran, and as Hill described to you, he ran past the picnic tables, all the way down this field, across what's like a long, sort of winding driveway that goes out to Coulter Street. But before he got to Coulter Street, he fell and he slipped in some rocks. And when he did, as Julius and Chris will describe to you, they caught up to him. Julius caught up to him first, jumped on top of him, and began hitting him. Mr. Melendez caught him some short time later, with Mr. Kane holding him down. Mr. Melendez delivered a few kicks and punches of his own. After that, Mr. Melendez left that scene and walked back up the driveway. Somewhere along the driveway, he ran into Marcus Morris and Markieff Morris, and the three of them went to the vehicle that they had driven that night, and they left the scene. Mr. Kane will tell you that he went back up the driveway sometime later, that he didn't see Mr. Melendez again. He did not see either Marcus Morris or Markieff Morris. He went and waited in his vehicle for several minutes just to make sure that Mr. Melendez wasn't around and didn't need a ride. And then he eventually left that 5th person who came with him. Pretty simple, right? So why are we here? Why are we here for a criminal trial alleging that the 3 individuals who had nothing to do with this altercation are in fact guilty of aggravated assault? Marcus Morris, Markieff Morris, and Gerald Bowman. Well, we're here principally because Eric Hood and Sharika Sharad have decided to lie, and they've lied repeatedly. Let's talk about Ms. Sharad first. As Mr. Fisher explained, Ms. Sharad intended engagement with Mr. Hood that night. She had known Mr. Hood for slightly less than a month at the time of this occurrence. She wanted to have a stronger relationship, a romantic relationship with him. And she attended this game in hopes of pursuing that. And she'll tell you that when she left the gym with Mr. Hood, by the way, she'll explain to you that Mr. Hood didn't say anything about having seen the Morrises or Mr. Kane or anybody else he knew when they were sitting and watching the game. So she'll explain to you, when they walked outside the gym, as Mr. Fisher alluded to, that she was confronted, Mr. Hood, by Julius Kane, struck in the back of the head. And then she actually gave several different versions as to what she saw next. The first version, she says, he falls right at the door, and immediately 5 people descend upon him, that coaches and referees are coming out of the gym. They're yelling at people to get off of him. There's multiple, tens of witnesses around. And then in her second version of the story, she says effectively the same thing happens, except this time, it goes out in the middle of the parking lot. She says the same thing when he falls down, and there's multiple people attacking him. All 3 defendants here, along with Mr. Melendez and Mr. Kane, shall tell you, and that she runs in to get help from coaches, and when they come out, those same 5 individuals are still physically assaulting him. And then she says, somehow, the coaches are trying to get people off, and they're not listening. Miraculously, even though he's being physically assaulted, hit and kicked by 5 individuals, including 2 individuals who are professional athletes. Somehow he's able to stand up, make his way through that group of people, and somehow end up here, a couple hundred yards away, where she was to find him later that night. Third version of the story, effectively the same, except when she describes, she says, takes place at the picnic tables. Now, the police interviewed almost 40 witnesses who were present in this area, sort of in front of the gymnasium, between the parking lot and the door. And there's not a single one of them, not a single person, who will say anything resembling what Ms. Sherrod described took place in this area. The only witnesses who saw something will say that Mr. Hood was struck once, or if at all, and that he ran down the full length of the property. They saw him run and being chased. There will be no dispute about that. Ms. Sherrod's story, moreover, and somewhat astoundingly, doesn't even match up with Mr. Hood's. As I suggested before, Mr. Hood will tell you that he was hit once and ran down the full length of the property. The Detective Santos, when he interviewed Mr. Hood the last time, substantively, about what occurred, he knew that there was discrepancy. Where he's got one witness, Ms. Sherrod, saying things are happening by the picnic tables. He thinks Mr. Hood is saying things happen at the end of the property. How can he reconcile these two? He does his best, and you'll hear the effort that he gives to that, but to no effect. Mr. Hood is very clear, crystal clear. He said once at the gym doors, and again at the end of the property. The evidence will show that absolutely nothing happened in this area around between the parking lot and the door. And with that, Ms. Sherrod has no value. Anything she says is of no value to this jury. And why, you're asking, why would she have an interest in lying? Well, the evidence is going to show that in addition to wanting to have a relationship with Mr. Hood, she had a financial interest that she believed as a witness or somehow connected to an incident involving 2 professional basketball players. She could personally, financially profit from that. So Eric Hood. Why would Eric Hood make up his story? You'll remember last Wednesday when we met, and I had asked if there were any jurors who were inclined to believe that someone would not make up a story as a victim just because of all that was sort of wrapped up in becoming a victim and all the difficulty that one endures having sort of taken on that mantle. And the reason I'm asking is because it's critically important to this case. The only evidence in any way implicating Marcus Morris at the end of this will be the testimony of Eric Hood, which, as I will explain to you and as you will hear over the next week or so, is totally incredible. So a little bit of background, I think, is helpful and necessary here. Marcus and Markieff Morris are 2 of 5 children to Thomasine Angel Morris, a single mother who raised them in North Philadelphia. Marcus and Markieff in addition to being very tall, were very gifted athletes, extraordinary basketball players, who at a young age thought that they were one of those very few people who actually had a shot of playing, high-level college basketball, and then if everything broke just right and they got extremely lucky, the National Basketball Association. So in addition to their normal high school program, you'll hear that they played in something called AAU, sort of like a parallel to high school, involving high school age students, by exposing them to kids from other places who are not necessarily through high school, but at the same age, at a higher level of play relative to the talent they're facing, certainly not anything beyond that. And the idea is it's supposed to make the kids better and help colleges see those kids who they may want to recruit. Well, there's an underside to this world as well, and that underside is that a lot of the people involved in these programs are ones who are not involved for the betterment of the kids. Certainly some are, but many are not. Many are involved looking to establish relationships with 14, 15, 16-year-old boys to groom those relationships. And that, hopefully, they hope, some point down the road, one of these kids is going to turn out, he's going to become a professional player in Europe or at the National Basketball Association, and I can find some way to enrich myself through that. Enter Eric Hood. Eric Hood, as you will hear, is a runner. So that's somebody whose job is to sort of pair relationships between promising athletes and those who would represent them in professional negotiations down the road. In this case, obviously, for professional basketball players. And the way that works is you develop that relationship, you groom that relationship, and at some point, if you get really lucky and one of these kids gets drafted when they're 19, 20, 21 years old, you will get a percentage or some money coming back to you from whatever professional contract that person signs. So Eric Hood was not an official coach in the AAU program that Marcus Morris and Markieff Morris participated in. Their coach was a guy named Greg Wright, who they were and to this day remain very close to. But Hood volunteered in that program, and he did it, I'm sure for some noble and personal reasons, but also for some professional reasons, as that's kind of his job. And the job looked like it was going pretty well. I mean, what are the odds that in this program where you happen to be volunteering in this particular area of Philadelphia, there's two kids who graduate from high school, go to prep school, they're recruited and played at the University of Kansas, one of the country's top college basketball programs. And these two guys, as they're making their way through Kansas, turn out to be extraordinarily good players. The kind of players who not just have a shot at playing professional basketball, but by their third year in Kansas, it is clear they will be playing in the NBA and they will be first-round picks. These guys, for someone in Eric Hood's position, they're the lottery ticket. And this is why he does the job, to have a relationship with these guys, and he's got it in. So he goes out to Kansas. He goes multiple times to visit these boys, to take them out to dinner, to work on that relationship with the hopes that at some point, somewhere down the road, this is going to pay out for him. But things go south. Marcus and Markieff Morris develop concerns about the relationship that Eric Hood has with their mother. And the four of them have a meeting, and they sit down, and Marcus and Markieff tell them in no uncertain terms that they don't want anything to do with him anymore. This is over for them. They were friends, and they don't want to be friends anymore. What happens over the next several years? Well, Eric Hood's life, as I understand it, remains pretty much the same, and I think you will hear that. He continues to work hard at doing what it is that he does. Obviously, things go very well for Marcus Morris and his brother Markieff. They're drafted different teams in the NBA, but in 2013, Marcus is traded to play here in Phoenix, where Markieff has already been with the Suns, 2 signed contract extensions. They're hopeful to be members of the Suns for years to come and teammates. And so in January of 2015, things really could not have been going better for them. And on January 24th, 2015, they attended a game here at the Arch Community Center because one of the prep schools involved in this tournament was coached by Rick Wright, that gentleman who had coached them through the AAD program that they were close with. And by coincidence, that same team had somebody associated with it, a guy named Alonzo Hickerson, who you will hear more about. And Mr. Hood had a deep relationship with Mr. Hickerson, and that is why he was at that game. So you will hear the Morrises go into the gym, they observe Mr. Hood is there. Mind you, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened from the time when they terminated their relationship with him several years down the road where they end up in this same gymnasium. There's not a threat. There's not an attack. There's not any kind of implicit suggestion that Mr. Hood should be careful. There's nothing. There's nothing because, as the Morrises explained to Mr. Hood, they were done with him and they were moving on with their lives. So they were in the gym, and they watched the game, and they observed that Mr. Hood is there. And as their practice to sort of avoid being stormed by kids right after the game, they got up and they left early. And then they went out and they went into this area of the parking lot where their car was parked. And unbeknownst to them, what I described to you before regarding Mr. Kane and Mr. Melendez was occurring. They did observe some number of heard some yelling, saw some people were running down, had no idea who that was, and then saw some of the kids who were hanging out in the parking lot heading down in that direction, and they took action to stop those kids because these were kids that they were associated with and didn't want to see them get into any trouble. So you will see in Mr. Hood's examination and his text messages a couple very interesting things. One is that his story is evolving in two important ways. The first is that immediately after the assault was over, his original intention was to go home. And that was because he knew what had happened to him, that Julius Kane and some other person he didn't know had assaulted him, and so there was nothing more to do other than to go home and lick his wounds and move on with his life. But he gets a phone call. And the phone call is from this guy, Alonzo Hickerson, who's Mr. Hood's connection with this particular game. And Mr. Hickerson tells him, don't go home, call the police, go to the hospital. The person who ran this tournament, a gentleman named Jacob Miller, saw the whole thing. He saw both twins hitting you and kicking you, and all the players, and Hickerson is associated with this program, and all the players saw it too. And so, what's Mr. Hood to think other than the lottery ticket has come back? That deal that I blew years before, where these guys said they wanted nothing to do with me anymore, it's back. I have it. And so he does exactly what he had been instructed to do, goes to the hospital, calls the police, and then tells a story similar to what Mr. Fisher was alluding to before, where 5 people attacked him here past the gate. Well, it didn't turn out the way that Mr. Hood had hoped. Not only did this witness, Jacob Miller, not indicate when he's interviewed by police that he saw both Morrises physically attacking Mr. Hood, he said he saw neither of them. Moreover than that, he said when he comes out of the gym, he sees an individual he believes Markieff Morris standing here in the parking lot. And that Markieff begins to run down this driveway, they jog down the driveway, he follows him, and then he doesn't lose sight of him until they get right here about to this ramada. And when they get there, they see Mr. Hood with 1 or 2 people standing over him, and the fight's over. Nothing more happened, Mr. Miller will tell you after that. So that's a problem. Obviously, if you're Eric Hood and you need to find some way to reconcile this with what you have told police in your subsequent interviews. So as you will hear, Mr. Hood's way out of this box is to say, in his third interview with Detective Santos, after, by the way, got a 12-minute, he stepped out of the room for a 12-minute telephone call with his lawyer. So, interview 1, all 5 guys do it. Interview 2, all 5 guys do it. Interview 3, all 5 guys do it. I'm sure, I'm certain, no doubt, no question,
12-minute call from the lawyer, leave the room, come back. I can't say for sure that I saw Markieff Morris doing it. The more that I think about it, I ran by him back here in the parking lot. And he and the detective go over how far the distance was, and they agreed that it's a long ways between those two things. And so this goes to the second reason we're here. We are here because the investigation here was woefully insufficient. There was a lot of it. As I said, they interviewed nearly 40 witnesses. And this is a 19-year assault detective with the City of Phoenix, Detective Santos, who will tell you that his department was treating this unlike any case he'd ever handled before. Nothing comparable to this was he granted at the very beginning of the case carte blanche. He could work as much overtime, he could put whatever resources he needed into this case. Because obviously you're talking to semi-celebrities here in Phoenix. Well, despite all that, they didn't come up with a single witness other than Ms. Sherrod or Mr. Hood who saw Marcus Morris or Markieff Morris do anything. Or Gerald Bowman, for that matter. Mr. Lackey will address his somewhat unique situation in a moment. And the detective didn't bother really to do any investigation into the financial motives that Mr. Hood might have. Unfortunately, we now have information that we'll share with you all, which will make abundantly clear what was motivating and what continues to motivate Mr. Hood today. Your job as jurors is to review the evidence and apply that standard that we talked about, the standard beyond a reasonable doubt. You've got multiple standards in the system, the legal system, the preponderance of the evidence. One side is slightly more convincing than the other. Clearly convincing where evidence is clear, you're convinced of something. This is well beyond evidence. This is beyond a reasonable doubt. What that means is the state starts at zero. Right now, the state has proven nothing. And it's got to get all the way to the top of the proof measurement. The state has to leave you convinced, utterly convinced, that there are facts supporting each of the elements of the crime charge. This is a case, frankly, that Marcus Morris, Markieff Morris, and Gerald Bowman should win on any of those words of proof. We don't have to, we only have to, and the only one we're allowed to consider is that beyond a reasonable doubt. We believe that when you pay attention to the evidence, when you think about it critically, when you listen to the witnesses, when you think about their motives, what they could have seen, what their statements are in any way consistent, the result will be clear. So when we come back at the end of the presentation of evidence, I will ask you to acquit Marcus Morris and his co-defendants, Markieff Morris